Hi. This week I'm exploring the question inspired by Mary Parker Follett of how can we have unity without needing uniformity? Or how can we connect across our differences? To sort of help us understand this topic, I want to recommend a TED Talk by Jonathan Haidt. The TED Talk is called The Moral Roots of Liberals and Conservatives. And he, through lots of research and so forth, has pulled out a lot of great data, and it means that we're able to understand, based on certain moral values that any individual have, we have a lot to understand also about where their politics are. On the general level, among liberals, there's a lot more openness to new experiences, and among conservatives, there's a lot more interest in order and traditions and so forth. There's a couple other things that he mentions in this video that I think are worth highlighting. One of them is that we are predisposed to go one way or another. It doesn't have anything to do with intelligence or our experiences. I mean, there is influence there, but for the most part, there's lots of research that shows that we're predisposed to lean one way or the other. So we can let go of the idea that we're going to change people to think a different way. And another reason why we can't change people is because everyone knows that they're right. Everyone knows that their values and morals that they're using to guide their life are the ones that are the right ones, because otherwise they wouldn't do it that way. I'm sure we all have moments where we maybe aren't acting in alignment with our own values, but for the most part, we know what our values are, and we're pretty sure that they're the right ones. People aren't really open to being convinced that they have the wrong values. If you have more thoughts about, you want to hear more about how do we deal with the internal experience of that, check out some of my videos on self-forgiveness from last week. But in this video, Jonathan Haidt breaks down that there are basically like 5 moral foundational belief systems, and they are care or avoiding harm, they are fairness, there's loyalty to the in-group, to your team, whoever that is, there is respect for authority, and then there's the belief in sanctity and purity. What's interesting is that in all the research that they've done on harm, care, and fairness, everyone kind of was more or less on the same page about the importance of those. The real difference comes in is loyalty to the in-group, respect for authority, and the value of purity. This is something that's much more highly valued on the right, and those are not valued as much on the left. What this kind of boils down to is that there's much higher interest in change and improvement, even at the risk of chaos on the left. And on the right, there's a desire to have order and purity and cleanliness, even at the expense of perpetuating past harms and so forth. As we organize ourselves into right and wrong around these different approaches, we get ourselves into the illusion that people are either not smart or not paying attention or don't understand this. We come up with all of these things. He says that we're trapped in the moral matrix. And what he's really saying is we're tricking ourselves if we're thinking that those people are doing it wrong and these people are doing it right, or vice versa. That isn't really what's going on. Everyone's being guided by different values, and all of these values are important. A great way to think about this is to look at this from the third perspective. In a certain way, we can be asking, what's the right way to be running our country? And if we start asking that question, well, some people might say, whoa, I see a bunch of problems and we need to improve upon them. Or they might say, wow, this is really great what we have going on here, and we shouldn't really risk changing it. The trick is both of those are actually really important. We can't step into a new future without making some changes, but if we don't stand on the ground that we're on with respect and gratitude, then we're not going to be able to go somewhere else. And one person that has done a ton of great work around this is Steve McIntosh. And this is someone who I've had on my podcast, Fractal Friends, a couple times. And He's written a book called Developmental Politics, and he has created an organization called the Post-Progressive. There's a website, the Post-Progressive Post. There's a lot of great analysis about, what would it look like to have integration of these different values without uniformity, but still holding that diversity, but actually holding all of these things. And one of the things this comes down to is the idea of interdependent polarities. I'm not going to get all the way into that right now, but what I'll just say is the desire to change and make progress and step into a new way is interdependent with the desire to keep things the way they are. There are things that are trustworthy. And both of these have risks. There are risks of not changing, and there are risks of changing. And they both have their valuable side. One creates space for improvement and keeps things dynamic, and the other one helps us stay stable and reliable and so forth. And so we're in this tension between change and order. And that is going to stick with us. And the answer is not to choose one over the other. And that's actually one of the most important things about interdependent polarities, is that if you try to choose one at the expense of the other, it will become a destructive force. But when they work together, that's when really amazing things happen. Another interdependent polarity that Steve McIntosh teaches about is grievance and gratitude. I think this one's useful for us to consider as we see things that we want to change, especially if we're trying to change our country. The question of what can we be grateful for? What can I be grateful for? What's going well? And how can I be not okay with the things that are not okay? Again, that kind of friction or that tension is stuff that I talk a lot about in the last set of videos, where I talk about forgiveness and holding the good and evil in each of us. I'm going to unpack this quite a bit more in my next video, where I'm going to talk about the second rule of conflict, that everyone has to be involved with the solution or it's not going to work. So thank you for watching this. Thank you for your interest in the Omni-Win project, and have a great day.